You know, there's always a risk when doing sequels. Sometimes there are those who are lucky enough to be just as good, if not better, than the first one. But a lot of the times, most of us agree that many of them don't capture the spirit of what made the first one great. Nowadays, it seems to be the trend to bring back beloved classics, whether in sequels, remakes, or crossovers. Some have surprisingly worked, while others do feel like a cash grab of nostalgia. I mean, who would have thought we would have seen the return of Michael Keaton in his most beloved roles, Batman and Beetlejuice? I shouldn't have said that out loud. Not just that, but seeing Tim Burton return to the Dietz family in Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Uh-oh. So, yeah, I'll be honest, this is probably the most nervous I've been about a new Tim Burton film. Due to the first one being made over 30 years ago, and also Tim's opinions on sequels. I mean, the last sequel, and only sequel up until this point, was Batman Returns, all the way back in 1992. But, to be fair, looking at all of his films, if I were to make a sequel out of one of them, Beetlejuice is probably the first one that comes to mind. Because let's be honest, this is where Burton's imagination can really excel. So, when the first few trailers were coming out, I was starting to get excited. Seeing Michael Keaton in the costume and full makeup, it's as though he had never left. So, did Beetlejuice Beetlejuice make me want to jump in the line, or am I still stuck in this rating room? The juice is definitely loose, and boy have I missed films like this. Now, when I mean that, I don't mean Tim Burton movies, because, in my opinion, I don't think he's made a single bad movie. I'm talking about movies in general that are just there to have fun and that are so handmade that I think audiences are begging for them. The amount of puppetry, stop motion, and practical effects just made it feel so alive. Once again, the makeup was outstanding, that I really just wanted to pause certain screens just to really take it all in and make sure I wasn't missing a thing. The first shot that we got of the afterlife, oh my god, it was screaming German expressionism, and I was like, I've missed this so much! The scene where we see Beetlejuice's ex-wife Dolores putting herself back together again, it was like watching Sally putting herself back together in live action, and it was great. And the image of all the shrunken heads were so funny and weirdly adorable. Even the homages, such as Beetlejuice's backstory in a Mario Bava style, or of course the joke about the Soul Train, were excellent additions. It just goes to show that, much like the first film, if you're willing to give yourself to the strange and unusual, you'll have a really good time. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the film doesn't have its heart as well. Much like the first one, the heart and centre of the story is of course Lydia Dietz, and in this one it's about her relationship with her daughter and also with Delia. Now, this review will be spoiler free, but just so you know, here's pretty much a synopsis of the movie. After a death in the family, the Dietzes return to the Maitlands' house, and a series of crazy events lead them to needing Beetlejuice's help. However, while he haunts many, others are haunting him. The focus was more on the three generations, including Delia, Lydia, and Astrid, in both their relationships and dealing with life and death. It was kind of interesting seeing Delia and Lydia having that strange connection while still being distant, considering the events of the first movie, but then it was also interesting as Astrid was more the point of view character, as she's the new one who's coming into the world of Beetlejuice. However, the problem is if I go further into this, it is going to land in spoilers. So all I'll say is there were some twists and turns that I was not expecting. And the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense and this is hilarious. However, in my opinion, the most important part was keeping the spirit of the first one. And man, does this one do it. This is by the visuals, the acting, the practical effects, and thank heavenly Jesus, they kept Beetlejuice as politically incorrect and limited his screen time, because that was the other thing I was worried about. I was worried that if he was going to get too much screen time in this, I feel like it was kind of, or it would end up being overkill. And thankfully it wasn't, and the few times that he was on screen, Michael Keaton, man, he can just, as I said, he can just slip back into character just like that. But as I said before, the thing that I was most excited about from the look of the trailers was seeing more of the afterlife. Those lopsided, you know, nothing is symmetrical, as I said, German expressionistic. They just look like they've come straight out of Tim Burton's sketches, and oh my god, it was just a marvel to look at. And again, I think people are begging for actual sets, like they were actually there. And of course, seeing all the creative ways that people die were just so inventive and so hilarious that, again, I wish I could pause the movie and just look around and see like, oh, how did you die? How did you die? Much like the first one, which was great. Now, I know that a few people who are on the fence about seeing this movie, considering being huge fans of the first one, are probably thinking about the callbacks. Yes, there are a few, but honestly they didn't bother me so much because, one, they do them differently enough that I didn't even realise halfway through. So for example, the musical number, again, I didn't realise that, oh, I get what they're doing, but again, the way it was done and the way it was filmed and the way the actors were doing it, it felt very new and it was still getting a laugh out of me. In fact, I think it was probably the biggest laugh out of the audience in the screening that I saw. And other times, sometimes the callbacks actually made sense, like when they did bring up the song Day-O, it kind of makes sense for the characters or the situation that, again, it just adds to the comedy. And the other thing is, I know a lot of people are a bit hesitant on the fact that the Maitlands aren't in it. And honestly, again, I feel like their story was done. Now I know there were other things that, you know, Burton said he wanted to explore more of the Dietzes, particularly Lydia, which, you know, let's be honest, she's like the second most popular character in that movie. And yeah, like I said, I think the Maitlands were just kind of, their story was done. So it really didn't ruin anything for me. Again, I like the fact that they brought them up, especially like with, you know, the model in the attic, and it was great to see that again. The music was definitely playing up. In fact, actually, that's one of the, if I had to really pick a critique, sadly it would have to be the music. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some great moments, and honestly, hearing the main theme and actual opening titles was incredible to hear on the big screen, because again, you know, I didn't see it when it originally came out, so it was like, oh, hearing it on surround sound was amazing. But I think sort of what I said about Dark Shadow's score, it was overshadowed by the soundtrack. Now, don't get me wrong, the songs, or the chosen songs, were really good. There's a particular moment where Beetlejuice is serenading Lydia. Oh my god, I had to control myself to stop laughing at that point. So the songs themselves are good, but as I said, much like Dark Shadows, it kind of overshadows Danny Elfman's score, and there wasn't that much new score that I could hear. Like, there were a few moments, particularly in the character of Astrid and of course Beetlejuice's ex-wife, but aside from that I couldn't really see anything new, and this might just be because of the kind of material that he was working with. something like Batman Returns, where you had two brand new characters that were so distinct in the Penguin and the Catwoman that we ended up getting amazing themes for those. Whereas here, it would have been a little bit harder for that. Again, I'm not shaming the score, it's just something that I notice, and again, it just would have been cool if I could have heard it, but maybe the next time I see it, or when I actually do listen to the soundtrack in its entirety, I might be able to pick more things out. But like I said, it was great to hear those familiar sounds, like from the first one, on the big screen. So honestly guys, that is my quick review of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. So I'm just gonna sum it up by saying, if you're a Tim Burton fan and or you're a fan of the first Beetlejuice, you will have fun with this, I promise you. Even those who are a bit hesitant about it and are just like, oh, I don't know because it's been so long since we've seen it, and is it going to be as funny, is it going to be as creative? It is, I promise you. And like I said, I don't think I've had this much fun watching a movie since, gosh, I don't know when. I mean, definitely before COVID. That's a definite. So honestly, and you know, having that said, and with other things going on and everything, I just think we need a big laugh. And seriously, it is worth it. If you don't get into it, you know, that's fine. It's not for everyone. I think if you go into that mindset, you know, like the first one, where you just kind of go, what the hell is going on? But you just embrace it, you will have so much fun, and you know, it's great to see that amount of practical effects back. And I hope it makes studios realise that we want more practical. It doesn't all have to be CG, because even in its imperfections, we still feel, you know, that, oh, there were people actually on set, it's actually there in front of you, and it really adds so much to it. And I think people are missing it, so please, studios, bring them back. And actually, having that said, I really hope that it makes studios realise that we can take surreal stuff, and I think people are really embracing it. We want something that's weird and random and just, you know, completely strange and unusual. So for me guys, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, I think I'm going to need a one-way ticket on the Soul Train to that movie. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope to see you back in Burtonland very soon. Take care.